Pinocchio, why didn't you go to school?
School?
Here he's kind of innocently looking for some way out of this, and I tried to pick little movements and gestures and bits of acting that showed how he felt, that he's caught in a trap, really. And so he looks over at the side, kind of looking for help. And of course, there's none there for him. He has to face this thing himself. I decided to pick some little thing like a little kid would do to show his embarrassment at being caught in this predicament. So I had him twisting his pants leg.
I was going to school.
A piece of acting that seemed to fit at this point. I always think basically of the emotion and then fit the action to it. In other words, I have to think, how would this guy act if he's terrified? Sometimes I act it out myself in the room, or sometimes I just act it out in my mind, not necessarily with a mirror, but just feel this situation, and then I try to make these drawings. And as I make them, I'm pushing and working my body because I feel it all through my body. And I feel this terror myself.
What's going on? Oh, I've been double-crossed! Help! Help! Somebody help! I've been framed! Help! Please, you gotta help me! Oh, be a pal! Call it!
Pinocchio is actually terrified here not only of Lampwick, but I think of what he thinks might be happening to himself. And this, with the face all tightened up the way, and here, you know, I've used extra lines here that actually make him look older because I think it helped the terrified feeling. And he's backed away from the guy with his shoulders up. He's like he's trying to push himself up the wall and get completely away from him, particularly as he sees these hands change into hooks.
A good example of the difficulties posed for the animators by a seemingly simple piece of action is the scene in which Pinocchio is placed inside a cage in a moving wagon.
They had this little perch inside the cage which was swinging different than the cage itself was going around. And they'd done a very interesting thing there. They built a cage, actually built one, a model of it only about so high. And we needed a cage, you know, actually a larger one. But they built it about half size of actual twigs so that it had the real look of the cage and it had the perch in it and everything. Then they photographed that swinging and bouncing the way it would as the wagon went along.
No! No, wait! Let me out! I'll tell my father!
Get along then!
Well, that saved the time of somebody having to animate that cage, which would have been an enormous job to get all those things in perspective, turning around, and get it accurate. But by having it already on film, then all I had to do was trace it off. Well, somebody else traced it off, and they gave me all these drawings of the cage bouncing around and say, okay, now put Pinocchio inside. And I said, whereabouts does he go inside here, you know, because he's sitting here and the cage swings like this. Well, how do you draw him this way? And as he starts to get up and reach for something, the floor drops out from under him. You have to have him match that perspective.
Oh, Johnny! Oh, Johnny, where are you? Johnny Cricket!
Well, I think it's your relationship with the character that keeps you going through a scene like that. Because if I had had Goofy in the cage, if I'd had Donald Duck in the cage, or anybody else, they would have acted differently. But I felt so strongly, poor Pinocchio, you know, it wasn't his fault he got thrown in there. And he didn't know what was going on. He didn't know how to deal with this thing. It was just sheer panic. He's a little kid.
I shouldn't have walked out on you.
Guess I'll never see my father again.